At Grandma's birthday banquet, she asked me to choose a partner for an arranged marriage. I glanced at Ethan, who stood tall and unapproachable, his posture as cold and distant as an icy mountain. Then my gaze shifted to Noah, who was bickering with a little boy over a lollipop. I pointed at him. When I stepped into the banquet hall, the first person I saw was Ethan. He stood there, tall and straight, exuding an aura of icy detachment. My eyes couldn't help but be drawn to him. Ethan noticed my gaze but turned his face away, his indifference unchanged from my previous life. I turned away and walked to the farthest corner from him, not wanting to linger and risk drowning in painful memories. Grandma was wheeled out of her room amid the cheers of the guests. Mason pushed through the crowd searching for me and, spotting me, called me over. I walked to her side and knelt down next to her wheelchair. "All the kids from the Bennett family around your age are here. See if there's anyone you like," she said, gesturing toward Ethan and Noah. I glanced at Ethan again. His cold and imposing demeanor made him seem unapproachable. Then I turned to Noah, who was still squabbling with a little boy over a lollipop. I pointed at him. In my previous life I had chosen Ethan, but even up until the day I died, I never earned his love. He thought I had forced him into the marriage and treated me colder than he treated his employees. I naively believed that with time I could melt his icy heart, but instead, he flaunted another woman in front of me, bringing her home to provoke me. When I demanded a divorce, he refused. Even in death, he bound us together, tormenting each other to the bitter end. Now that I had a second chance, I refused to live that kind of life again. When I pointed at Noah, the room fell silent with shock. Ethan abruptly raised his head to look at me. Earlier, when I turned to make my choice, his eyes had been closed. How could he have noticed? Someone in the crowd tried to speak but was hushed. "The old lady's here. Don't say anything." The shock was understandable. By this point in time, I had been pursuing Ethan for half a year. I delivered meals to his office 3 times a day without fail. On weekends and holidays, I went to his company to wait for him. My persistence had made me a well-known fangirl of his, but Ethan had never once agreed to eat a meal with me, let alone go on a date. Many in both the Carter and Bennett families knew about my unrequited feelings for Ethan but had kept it from Grandma. They were afraid that if she found out about my feelings, she would force the engagement. Ethan, being the rebellious type, would only make things worse and upset her. Grandma had brought up this arranged marriage now because her health was failing. She wanted to fulfill the engagement my grandfather had arranged before his death. As the only granddaughter of the Carter family, Grandma cherished me deeply and wanted to see me settled with a good match before she passed. The Bennett family owed a great debt to the Carters, so they left the matter entirely in our hands. I looked at Noah and asked, "Do you agree?" Noah, who was usually aware of my feelings for Ethan, seemed frozen in place, lost in thought. I worried he might reject me. My gaze instinctively shifted back to Ethan, but no, that was absolutely not an option. Just as I debated whether to pull Noah aside for a private conversation, he suddenly spoke. "You chose me," he turned sharply, looking at me in disbelief. His abrupt movement caused the lollipop in the little boy's hand to fly into his own. The boy immediately burst into tears but quickly clamped a hand over his mouth, his posture awkward and undignified. A derisive laugh echoed across the hall. All eyes turned to Ethan, who smirked coldly and stared at Noah with contempt. The atmosphere in the hall grew tense and awkward. I ignored Ethan. Despite his young age, he had already taken control of half the Bennett family's business empire and was used to doing things his way. I turned back to Noah and repeated, "Do you agree?" I stared at Noah and asked him again. Beads of sweat formed on my forehead, betraying my nervousness. I wasn't sure what he was thinking. In my previous life, I hadn't paid much attention to him, and now I felt a growing sense of urgency. Noah looked at me for a moment before nodding. I finally let out a breath of relief. What a good person. I'll have to thank him properly later. He must have been worried about me losing face and didn't want to reject me in front of everyone. After all, we'd had no connection before this moment, and until today, I'd been obsessively chasing after another man. Any other man in his position probably wouldn't have agreed. But now that I've been reborn, I know that Grandma's passing is only a few days away. If Noah hadn't agreed, I wouldn't have been able to find someone else to put Grandma at ease and allow her to leave this world with peace of mind. In my previous life, I had chosen Ethan. To my surprise, he didn't reject me outright at the time. Instead, he had a private conversation with me afterward, explaining that he had agreed only out of consideration for Grandma's health and telling me not to overthink it. When Grandma passed away, she held my hand together with Ethan, urging us to take care of each other. After her funeral, Ethan's parents began pressing for our wedding. I thought we hadn't spent enough time together and worried he would feel forced into it, so I kept delaying. But Ethan agreed before I could say anything, telling me not to play coy. He said he wouldn't disobey Grandma's dying wish. Not long after we got married. There was no ceremony, just the formalities. Our relationship before and after marriage didn't change much, aside from moving in together. For 5 years, Ethan remained cold and indifferent to me. Other than a few social events I had to attend with him, he rarely spoke to me. One night I worked late, and a colleague offered me a ride home since it was on his way. Ethan happened to see us when he got home. Perhaps it triggered his possessiveness, but he rushed over and punched my colleague. That night we had a huge argument, the first real fight since I had met him. After that he stopped coming home regularly. Angry and hurt, I didn't try to patch things up. We were locked in a cold war until the day he brought another woman home, holding her close as if to flaunt her in front of me. That was the final straw. I wanted a divorce, but he refused. We remained trapped in a cycle of mutual torment until the day I died. Grandma's cheerful laughter pulled me out of my thoughts. It was the first time I'd seen her so happy since she had fallen ill and become bedridden 6 months ago. She held my hand, giving me a few words of advice before chatting with some of her old friends. When fatigue overtook her, she had the attendant wheel her back to her room. Left to myself, I scanned the room until I spotted Noah. I walked over and pulled him aside. "Thank you for helping me. Don't feel pressured. Once Grandma has passed peacefully, we can." I began, but Noah suddenly raised his hand to stop me. "Don't move. Stay here and wait for me," he said, then ran off toward the Bennett estate next door. Less than 5 minutes later, he was back carrying a box. Opening it, he pulled out a stack of certificates. I majored in computer science in college. These are my competition awards from back then. I'll admit I've always been a bit laid back, but I'm not dumb. I can code and develop programs. I won't be aimless or starve just because my family doesn't help me out, he said, pulling out a property deed, 2 car keys, and a bank card. This is what I earned from developing games with friends. The apartment is a 2-bedroom unit in the city center. Nothing fancy, but the location's good. As for the cars, there are 2 of them. If there's something you like, feel free to use it, Noah said. There's only about $1 million in the account right now, not much, but you can spend it. I'll make more, a lot more. Don't worry. With that, he shoved the box into my arms as if afraid I might refuse it. Don't misunderstand me, he added quickly. You chose me, didn't you? Even though we're just testing the waters as a potential match and you might not choose me in the end, I want to be upfront with you about everything. You don't have to do the same for me. This is just how I am. He waved his hands nervously, as if worried I'd think he expected the same openness from me. I thought you wouldn't agree, I murmured, looking down at the box in my arms, my emotions tangled. I'm happy, Noah replied, looking directly at me. His tone serious and deliberate. You chose me, that makes me happy. So you don't need to feel guilty or thank me. And you definitely don't need to end things after your grandmother passes. I lifted my eyes to meet his gaze. We held eye contact for a moment before suddenly, he bolted. Noah! I called after him. Holding the box, he waved a hand without turning back. I'm not good at making girls happy. Take it. If you decide later you don't want to be with me, we'll deal with it then. And then, in a flash, he disappeared through the door. I couldn't help but marvel at him. He was too well raised, offering everything he had just for an experimental match. Didn't he worry about being cheated out of his entire savings? The weight of the box in my arms felt overwhelming as I stared down at it, trying to decide what to do. A shadow loomed over me. I looked up and found myself face to face with Ethan. His mocking gaze pinned me in place. Playing hard to get. Does it feel fun? He sneered. I blinked momentarily, stunned, before realizing what he meant. You think you picked Noah as a marriage match just to get my attention, don't you? Ethan sneered, his lips curving into a sarcastic smile. Last night you braved the rain to bring me dinner, left a note with Ted reminding him to take care of me, and handed him an umbrella and cold medicine just in case. And now this morning you suddenly chose someone else. Aside from trying to get back at me for shutting you out of my office last night, what other reason could you have? You realize that constant effort doesn't get my attention, so now you're trying reverse psychology. His sharp words hit me like a cold slap, and for a moment the memories from my past life surged back. Back then, I had been utterly infatuated with Ethan, chasing him to the point of throwing away my dignity. No matter how coldly he treated me in front of others, I clung to the hope that he would one day reciprocate my feelings. It was no wonder he found it unbelievable that I'd suddenly chosen Noah. But I never expected his reaction to be this intense. You don't even like me. Shouldn't you be happy that I've stopped bothering you? I asked, looking straight at him. For a brief second, Ethan hesitated, his gaze faltering, but then he looked back at me, his expression cold once more. Don't flatter yourself, he snapped. Do you think I'm the slightest bit agitated because I like you? Stop being delusional. I just can't stand the thought of losing to someone like Noah. A wife from that kind of family, he added, his voice dripping with disdain. His words didn't surprise me. Ethan and Noah were both from the Bennett family, but Ethan was the eldest grandson of the main branch. His parents held esteemed positions in both politics and business, commanding respect wherever they went. In contrast, Noah's father stayed out of family affairs, choosing to be a professor at a prestigious university, while his mother was an actress, a profession looked down upon in elite circles. From a young age, Ethan had shown exceptional talent. His photographic memory and sharp intellect made him the pride of the family. Noah, however, had to work much harder to achieve even a fraction of Ethan's success. To make matters worse, he had abandoned the family business path, choosing instead to pursue programming and game development. His rebellious choice had angered the family elders, who eventually gave up on him entirely, excluding him from family business activities and events, leaving him to fend for himself. The box in my arms felt heavier with every step, my hands beginning to ache as I tried to make sense of everything. Ethan's words still echoed in my ears. His disdainful tone, his cold certainty that I was playing some kind of game. The weight of his judgment pressed down on me even more than the box itself. But I was done letting him pull me back into a cycle of pain and confusion. If I didn't set things straight now, I never would. I turned to face him, meeting his gaze without flinching. Ethan, I said, my voice steady, I don't like you anymore. My choice to not pick you today, and to choose Noah instead, has nothing to do with you. You can rest easy. You've made it clear you don't like me, and you obviously despise Noah. Perfect. From now on, we go our separate ways and have nothing to do with each other. With that, I turned and walked toward the door, hoping he would just let me go. But before I could escape, he suddenly grabbed my wrist. What are you doing? I snapped, twisting my arm in an attempt to pull free. His grip, however, remained ironclad. You say you don't like me anymore, he asked, his voice icy under the dim light. His eyes were dark, unreadable, like a frozen lake with no bottom. Let go of me, I demanded, glaring at him. My words were firm, deliberate. But instead of loosening his grip, he only held on tighter. I don't believe you, he said just as coldly. For a moment I was stunned. Then memories came rushing back. Memories I had buried long ago. There was a time when I owned a necklace I no longer wanted, so I carelessly tossed it into a pond. That night I fell ill with a fever. A rumor spread that the necklace had been a gift from someone important, and my illness was seen as punishment for carelessly discarding something sentimental. In the dead of winter, Ethan jumped into the freezing water to retrieve it for me. He ended up with a high fever for 3 days, so severe it nearly cost him his life. "You were someone willing to risk your life for me," Ethan continued, his voice low and intense. "How could you just suddenly stop liking me without warning?" So he had known about the necklace all along. I had gone out of my way to keep it a secret, worried he would feel burdened if he knew. Yet he had always known. A bitter laugh rose in my chest. How ridiculous I must have looked, giving my whole heart to someone who knew but never cared. In my past life, our marriage had always been forced, something I had pushed onto him. He resented me for it, and his coldness, his silent neglect lasted a lifetime. The love I gave with all my heart must have seemed utterly insignificant to him. "Let go," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. But Ethan's grip only tightened. The pain became unbearable, and I couldn't hold back a cry. Finally, his fingers loosened slightly, and I seized the chance to wrench free and rush inside. I slammed the door shut behind me, cutting off his presence and the storm of emotions he brought with him. I quickly climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor and locked myself in my bedroom, making sure no one saw the expression on my face. As soon as the door clicked shut, my strength gave out and I slid down to the floor. In my past life, I had harbored resentment toward Ethan. He had always had a choice: not to marry me, not to accept me as his arranged partner, not even after Grandma's passing. And yet he did marry me, only to blame me for everything afterward, dragging us both into a lifetime of misery. His decision was first made out of consideration for Grandma's health, and later out of obligation to her final wish. But no matter the reason, it all started because I had chosen him at the banquet. I couldn't deny it. The suffering I endured was the result of my own choices. Thud pulled me from my thoughts. The box Noah had given me tipped over, spilling the bank card, property deed, and car keys onto the floor. It was a stark reminder that those were events from another life. I patted my face lightly, trying to pull myself together. This life would be different. I wouldn't make the same mistakes. The next morning, I was jolted awake by one of Grandma's attendants urging me to wash up and come downstairs. I thought Grandma needed me for something urgent, but when I reached the living room, I found Noah waiting there. He had changed from the casual t-shirt he wore last night into a sleek black suit, making him look far more formal. "Good morning," he greeted me with a nod. I returned the greeting and glanced around. "Where's Grandma?" "She asked Mrs. Jiang to take her to the back garden for some fresh air," Noah explained, his face slightly flushed. "She also said she wants us to move in together," he added, lowering his head as his ears turned red, as if they might start bleeding from embarrassment. When Noah mentioned this, it reminded me of my previous life. After I chose Ethan as my marriage partner, Grandma gave us a house the very next day, insisting we move in together to build our relationship. "Do you not want to?" I asked, seeing how flustered Noah looked. "No," he immediately blurted, lifting his head. "I'm willing." His gaze met mine briefly before his face turned crimson again. He quickly looked away, avoiding eye contact. His shy, almost innocent reaction to relationships made me feel a pang of guilt. After experiencing the pain of a failed marriage in my past life, I had no expectations for love in this one. To me, this arrangement was merely to give Grandma peace of mind. But for Noah, he was dragged into this because of my choice. If he had no feelings for me or no hopes for this relationship, it would have been easier for me. While Noah and I were chatting, my luggage had already been packed by the house staff. Mrs. Jiang had returned from the garden and handed me a set of keys. "The old lady has already transferred ownership of the house to your name," she said. It's the closest and best one near your workplace. In my past life, I had been thrilled at the opportunity to live with Ethan and accepted Grandma's arrangement without hesitation. But now, knowing Grandma only had a few days left, I wanted to stay by her side. Mrs. Jiang seemed to notice my hesitation. She placed a hand on my arm and said gently, "The old lady just asked for water again. She's not in great shape and doesn't want you to see her like this. She's lived a full life, seen everything, and has no regrets. After your grandfather passed, she felt life had lost its meaning. But when your parents had their accident and you were still so young, she pushed through with the company, losing a husband and carrying the weight all these years. As long as you're happy, she'll leave this world without regrets." I knew everyone had already noticed how frail Grandma had become. She spent more than half the day asleep now, and there was no telling when she might not wake up again. That's why she had left the hospital and returned home, to spend her final days surrounded by family. I nodded silently, the heaviness in my heart growing. The driver eventually dropped Noah and me off at the house Grandma had arranged. The cool autumn breeze brushed past us, carrying the familiar scent of osmanthus blossoms, pulling me out of my thoughts. Noah stepped out first, then walked around to open my door. I looked up at the house, a place so familiar it felt etched into my bones. But as I prepared to step out, my foot felt as if it were weighed down by 1,000 pounds. In my past life, Ethan and I had only stayed in this house for a few days before Grandma passed away. After we married, I moved into Ethan's home, and this house remained empty. Later, during our Cold War, after Ethan brought another woman into our home, I moved back here alone. He followed me, claiming he wanted to keep an eye on me, afraid I'd bring another man here and embarrass him. He even used it to block my attempts to divorce him, saying, "You forced me into this marriage, so you'll suffer through it with me for life." I couldn't stop Ethan from moving in, but this house was a gift from Grandma, a place that symbolized her hopes for my happiness. The weight of the box in my arms felt heavier than ever, but not just from its contents. This was a turning point, a moment that carried the echoes of my past and the fragile hope of something different in this life. I had chosen Noah, not as a ploy to get Ethan's attention, not out of desperation or obsession, but because I wanted to break free from the cycle that had ruined me before. Ethan stood there, still watching me with that sharp, unreadable gaze. The boy who once jumped into freezing water for a necklace I didn't even care about now looked at me like I was a stranger he couldn't quite believe. But I wasn't his problem anymore. I turned and walked away without another word, leaving him standing alone under the dim lights of the banquet hall. I could feel his eyes on my back, but I didn't look back. Not this time. When I reached the car, Noah was already waiting by the passenger door, holding it open. He looked nervous, unsure if he'd overstepped, if I would hand everything back and say it was all a mistake. But instead I smiled, small, tired but real, and got in. As we drove away, the autumn air swept through the open window, carrying the scent of blooming osmanthus and the quiet promise of change. I glanced at Noah, who kept his eyes on the road, occasionally glancing at me like he was trying to figure out what exactly had just happened. "You really don't have to do this," I said finally, breaking the silence. He blinked, then gave a soft chuckle. "Do what? All of this? The house, the money, the cars? You didn't ask for any of this." He shook his head. "You chose me," he said simply. "That means something." I looked down at my lap, my fingers twisting together. "It doesn't mean what you think it does." "Maybe not yet," he admitted. "But I want to try. Not because of Grandma, not because of some obligation. 'Cause maybe I've liked you for a while. Quietly. From afar. And I thought you were chasing someone else, so I never said anything." I stared at him, surprised. "I'm not Ethan," he continued, voice steady. "I don't know what kind of pain you're carrying, or how long it'll take you to trust again. But I don't want to be your second choice. If you let me in, it'll be because you want to." I didn't know what to say. For years I had chased someone who never saw me, never wanted me. And here was someone who saw me clearly, and still chose to stay. A few days later, Grandma passed peacefully in her sleep. Her final words were of love for me, and a gentle reminder to live my own life. She left behind a legacy of warmth, wisdom, and the quiet strength that had held our family together for decades. At her funeral, Ethan approached me one last time. "She loved you more than anything," he said quietly. "She just wanted you to be happy." He nodded. "I know. And are you?" His voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. I looked toward the horizon, where the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the sky. "I think I might be," I answered honestly. In the end, I didn't need revenge or reconciliation. I needed to walk away, not just from Ethan but from the version of myself who believed love had to hurt to be real. Noah and I didn't rush into anything. We took our time, built something slow and steady. Not perfect, not dramatic, but real. And when people asked how we ended up together, I always smiled and said, "I chose him." And for once, I didn't choose wrong. Because sometimes the person who saves you isn't the one you chase. It's the one who waits patiently, ready to offer everything, not to fix you but to walk beside you. And that, I realized, was the ending I had been searching for all along.